thank you so much for bringing me on today. I appreciate it.
Yes, no, I appreciate you taking the risk. I'm really doing these interviews, but I don't know if you follow how much you follow my page, but I am a huge advocate of resiliency as it relates to trauma. I fear that sometimes the narrative is that we get lost in kind of despair as it relates to trauma, and I really want to kind of encourage people to be like, oh, it absolutely has an impact, and it can have a lifelong impact. I don't want to minimize that, but how we can navigate it so that it has the least amount of impact as possible, I do think is true. And hope and resilience is, to me, is kind of the key aspects of recovery of trauma, and that's what I hope to do in these interviews. And of course, I've seen your page, and some of the things you talk about are one of my other favorite words is curious. You definitely operate from a curious lens. And so when you offered to be interviewed, I'm like, okay, I'm down for this. This is going to be great.
Thank you. Yes, curiosity indeed is never ending because the more I've learned about healing myself, the more I've wanted to understand others better. Because once I like started that journey of self-healing, it made me want to constantly be on a journey of self-improvement and gaining more self-awareness, but not in a way that is like an obsession due to striving for perfection, if that makes sense.
Uh,
More like wanting to be my best self for both myself and for others, because, when we heal ourselves, we're improving our relationships with others.
And it's funny because one of my mantras is the majority of us are damaged or hurt in relationships. So truly, we are healed in relationships as well. And I'm actually working on my PhD, and my dissertation actually is on what are the elements that we need to be in order for us to be, if we're in a loving relationship, how do we help heal in the context of that relationship as the partner, not as the actual survivor. And
Yes, I know you have touched on, and I've heard kind of like throughout just scrolling through the app, is a lot of people think that like a healthy relationship, whether it's like a very deep like soul friendship or like a romantic relationship, that when you connect with that person, everything is so easy and like you're always showing like your good side, when in reality the healthiest of those relationships is going to show you the shadows in yourself that you still need to work on. Almost like that person triggers you, but in a healthy way, like not in a triggering as in like this is dangerous for me, but like some people run away from that though.
yes, I actually
From
have done.
that, like, oh my god, I have to be my best self and I have to be like a healed person. Because like I know I've heard you say before too, like a lot of people think I have to be perfect and complete before I can like venture into any sort of relationship or workplace. But the reality that is like we're constantly on that journey. So like we're never going to be there.
And to your point, I've actually have done a couple of TikToks where I know I have been activated by things that have gone on with my partner. And
Mm,
when you're in a healthy relationship, right, you can slow down and be able to recognize what's his, what's mine, how is it
mm,
showing in the relationship, and then how we choose to do it differently in the future. And that's the growth aspect, right? If I was never in relationship, could you slow down enough to be able to do that? And that really is kind of, to me, why healing occurs in the context of relationships and why that's so important.
absolutely. I've met a lot of people in my life who are like, I don't share when I'm getting to know people, I don't share a lot of like personal private things with them until I feel comfortable like they're opening up and it's a safe space. But I will kind of touch on like how my mindset changed on certain things and they'll say, "Oh, that's really inspiring.
Mm.
Wow, I really have to do some more work." And I'm like, "I'm not calling you out. I'm not judging you, but sometimes they see it as like I'm not ready for you because you're kind of seeing what you've done for yourself is reminding me of like what I still have to do."
Oh, well, and that's kind of what I'm hoping we're going to get out of today. So I know I
I-
mentioned, but just to be
I'm an open book, so I'm happy to. I really am. Like I'm actually going to write a book on my story someday.
I,
So
I love
very
it.
open. Thank
Um,
you.
just to, so we are going to record this, or it is recorded, I guess, as you know, that's how TikTok works. And then I'm likely to create some clips out of this afterwards. Hopefully, I did it the last. The last video I did, I actually created some clips, and even in the four that I created, I definitely got better as I went along. So, um,
Good.
I guess that's like my footnote of be patient with my editing skills.
No, not at all. No, I'm still new in this. It all good.
All right.
Most videos you've seen, like the professional looking ones, that are mostly on my Instagram, like that's working with a team. But I'm filming myself more now. So
So, give us a little bit about your demographic first. Like, where do you live? How old you are, and kind of what you're doing with your life today, and then give us a little bit about your backstory.
okay. My name is Nikki Connor. I am 36 years old. I live in Los Angeles, California, and I am a professional chef and a health nutrition counselor. And I actually found my passion a little later in life. If you saw my resume, like I had various different jobs, from entertainment to modeling to like commercial production, CPA, like everything. Since I've lived in different cities, but once I found my passion in life, I realized it's the best thing for my mental health as well because I have Asperger's, I'm on the autism spectrum, and I have ADHD and CPTSD. So for me to find something that like doesn't bore me is very important, where it's almost like a meditative act where like physically I'm doing something with my hands so I can't fidget, but also it calms me down and that's when I know it makes me happy. So that's when I fell in love with like health nutrition and cooking because it's such a large world where there's so much to learn and improve in that you never know everything. You can't be the best, if that makes sense. So like I love that because it makes me be like, well, what do I want to specialize in and what can I learn to improve? So I'm always entertained by what I do. And the people I work with, are very interesting since I work in LA. You can imagine I work in Hollywood with family actors, models, musicians. It's interesting and building my own brand as well. And I really love helping people and educating people, which is why I'm, on social media now, kind of sharing more of what I do. I understand that a lot of people on platforms like TikTok tend to stick to a niche. I'm well aware of that. I follow those pages, right? Like yours, like you're in
Yeah.
counseling. But for me, I am almost like I wouldn't say triggered because like I'm inspired more by a lot of what people say that I want to respond to or add to or kind of share my perspective because it's making me think about something. So even though I have cooking videos and things like I can't not be myself and talk about how I feel also and
Right.
what I think. So that's kind of how I'm using my platform where it's like I can't make it look perfect. I believe that like my Instagram page is like my business card, like, hi, this is me, like this is what I do. TikTok is like this is who I am.
Yeah.
And um yeah, so my background, I guess I could say as far as like trauma and healing, um I was um I was sexually abused as a child by a family friend from ages 5 to 9. And my parents never knew. If they had, they would have freaked out and protected me. To this day, they blame themselves for not protecting me, which breaks my heart because I tell them you couldn't have known.
Right.
Um, I was told to keep it a secret forever, which brought me a lot of shame because I didn't know what I was feeling. I was a little kid.
Right.
And I felt really weird because I then, when I started getting attention from boys as I was like blossoming, I thought, oh, I remember feeling this way when I was a kid, but I can't tell the other kids why and or why I know so much more about like human sexuality than they did. And then when I was barely 14, I was actually raped, and that's how I lost my virginity.
Wow.
um, yeah, it was. I had a serious boyfriend at the time who got me drunk and took advantage of me, and went to his school and bragged to everyone about it, which caused me to be suspended from school
Yes.
because I was suspended for not being a virgin.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a Christian school, and I told my parents what happened. I didn't tell them that he had taken advantage of me because I knew they would freak out, and I was ashamed. I was embarrassed. So I said, um, I was like, oh, this did happen and I wasn't ready, but it happened. I can't take it back. And they were like, why are you suspended? This doesn't make sense. And the principal made me go to the doctor to prove if I was a virgin. Yeah, it was traumatizing. That on top of it was traumatizing. And so I had been with one person, but I already had this like reputation through this guy's school because he'd bragged about me. So I didn't really have any friends. I had a couple friends, but I was bullied then severely. The older girls at school would like beat me up, scream at me, call me names. And so I, on top of already feeling terrible about myself, like this was adding on to it because I let it go inside. Um, so I started acting out through like experimenting with drugs and alcohol, and guys, but I did it privately where no one knew about it. Like I would use at parties, but like going out with guys in college where like nobody knew. It was like my secret because something had been ignited in me where I had all this pain and I was like, I felt so, I guess, neglected in a way because I had neglected myself that I thought I deserved to feel like this. I deserve to be treated like garbage. So I went through that. And then when I was 17, I was in a relationship with an addict alcoholic who tried to kill me. And I was in college at University of San Diego, and he was literally cuffed at gunpoint in my school hall and taken to jail. And his parents told me I did the right thing because they knew he had a problem. So luckily, I had like some people behind me more. I started feeling a little more comfortable talking
Sounds like
about.
the first time, really, because
Yeah,
all your other stories, right? They were.
I was my parents' like worst nightmare, and it was weird because they were like, "We don't understand because we give you so much love. Like we don't understand like yeah, my parents argued and then they got divorced like when I was they divorced like 10, 12 years ago. But they were like, we're giving you all this love and we're communicating with you. We're sending you to therapy. Like, why are you so angry? Like they were like, what did we do wrong? Because they didn't know what was going on, right? Like what was stemming from. And bless them for trying everything, right? Like I was heavily medicated. I was a zombie because they didn't know. They're like, she's depressed. We don't know why. We're giving her this great life. Like, where is it coming from? So when I turned 18, I broke it off with this guy because I was using drugs and I knew it wasn't me. So I went to my parents and told them I was doing drugs. I literally was like, I just want you to know I've been using drugs and I'm quitting. And I broke up with this guy. And um, my parents were like, okay, what do you want to do? Do you need to go to rehab? I'm like, no, I'm not addicted. And they said, well, then what do you clearly need like some healing from this guy because we knew he was bad news. And I said, I feel like I need to go away somewhere to heal, but not a rehab. So I went to this like therapy outward bound program. I'm sure you're familiar like with those.
I love Outward Bound. Most
Yeah, I was sent to
by
when
choice.
I was. Oh,
Or
sorry.
I was
Go
just going
ahead.
to say those that have gone usually have gotten a lot out of it when they go by choice. When they don't go by choice, maybe not some. I've had some of those cases as well. It
Hmm.
really relative, right? But that you did this by choice. You found an Outward Bound program by choice.
I was 18 when I went to the second one. Now, the first one, when I was 15, I was sent to one because I was acting out. I was misbehaving. I wasn't doing anything illegal, but my parents were like, she needs to like get this out of her system. Like, the problem was when I got to this place, I was a bad kid for having an attitude. These other kids, like,
In another league.
were juvenile, yeah, like they were juvie and they had like seriously broken the law. So I didn't fit in with that. And anyway, it was a terrible experience. It was like kind of abusive. So then when I was 18, I was like, I want to go to a different program, but that's actual therapy, like real therapy. So I went to this place in Utah, and my therapist at the time, I've been through so many therapists because I had bullshitted all of them because I was hiding the secret, right? Of the real like underlying trauma. So because it had built up, like more abuse, more abuse, more abuse, more trauma. So she told me, she's like, something's going on with you. And if you don't cut the shit and get straight with me, I won't see you anymore.
Mm.
I was like,
Wow.
no
What?
one had ever spoken to me like that, besides like my parents, right? So I agreed. I was like, whatever this lady says, I will do. So I went to this program. The day I get there, they're like, you need to write your life story and tell us everything and why you're here. And I was like, in front of 25 strangers, like,
Know these people.
absolutely. Right? I was like, to be vulnerable in front of people I don't know? Hell no. Well, I wrote a kind of vague story of my life. And I said, I've had a lot of depression. I've had a lot of anxiety. I only knew that I had ADHD. I did not know that I was on the spectrum at the time. So I knew that I was like just an easy target for the bullying and stuff. And I knew my parents knew something else was going on mentally, but they're like, she excels in these subjects. We don't know what it is. So anyway, a therapist pulled me aside and was like, something's missing. And I want you to know you're never going to see these people again. Do you want to keep running away from your problems? Or do you want to actually basically like grow a pair and deal? Yeah.
Be honest.
So I wrote the whole story and I shared it, and I literally ran into the desert. I was so scared after I'd shared that because I had never spoken those words in my since age, my entire life, and I've been holding this in since age 9.
So what
Um,
I'm always curious about is like the tipping points, right? So I can hear, even now, I can hear a lot of ambivalence in your voice about should I have told, should I have not have told. Do you, and although clearly she would be what I would call a container, right? She created a space for you to like, I can hold this information no matter what it is, I can hold this information. And she was able to do that for you. But what was going on in your head that actually made you take the risk to put it down, to write it? Do you remember? I know that was a while ago, but do you
I was sick and tired of my own shit.
mm,
Honestly, like in a tough love thing to myself, I was like, I so badly want to be happy because I was so miserable. I had tried to kill myself a few months before.
mm.
And my parents didn't know until I told my dad that he had saved my life by calling me. I overdosed on pills, and another person in my hall like pried them out of my. Anyway, I wanted to end it all because I was so dark inside, and I was like, I just want to be happy and feel normal. Like I hate myself. And when this woman said, "Do you want to keep running away from your problems, or do you want to finally just deal with this now?" I was like, the drugs didn't work, sex didn't work, bullshitting therapists didn't work. Clearly, I'm not smarter than this. I was like, you know what? I need to really just. I'd already been hard enough on myself, hating myself, right? Saying you're not good enough, being shamed. But that's when I finally sat down and they sent the story to my parents.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's how my parents found out. And they told the therapist, they're like, we are here. No, but they both flew out to see me because they were like, we need to hug you. Like, are you okay? And they also were like, keep her there as long as you need because we want her to really do the work. And this place was hardcore in that anytime you would make a mistake and they would call you out and you would start to explain, they'd say, stop justifying your behavior.
Mm.
And to this day, this was when I was 18. I'm 36 now. To this day, I think about that. The fact that, like, immediately people tend to, want to gaslight or justify their behavior, right? But I was like, I will never forget being called out by these therapists where I realized you're holding more inside resentment, pain, when you keep jumping from one almost like escape method to another, right? Whether it's in the way you socialize or your self-destructive behavior, which I was very good at. Clearly I did it all. And so that was when I just got sick and tired of my own shit, and I was like, I'm going to deal with it. I acted out when I was there. I was the first person in the entire history of the program who had acted out and gotten away with like going with a guy there. And so my parents were like, keep her there. So 65 days I
Mm.
stayed there, came out of it, and I went back to college. Um, and I continued my education. I got my act together to show my parents that like I had done the healing. 'Cause I didn't. Other people who were there for like addictions, they had to go to a halfway house. I didn't because I didn't have an addiction for being there. So I got to go home. And when I earned my parents' trust back, I got to move away to LA for the first time. And that was when I kind of decided to really change my behavior and environment. Now, I still acted out here and there. Um, and that was also what led to me having a really healthy relationship with a man
Mm.
who showed me how I deserved to be treated after all this like abuse that I had been through. And I was so scared of him leaving me and like not thinking that I was, because I still didn't feel worthy of myself. So that was a long journey, but you know, it was really healing. And then when I broke away from that, that was when I really started working on myself alone. So yeah, so that's kind of the basis of the background of like where I'm coming from.
So tell me a little bit about that first, because the way you described that relationship with the man was basically your first intimate relationship, meaning he actually saw you.
Yeah,
So tell
it
me,
was.
because I imagine there was a lot of ambivalence, push and pull in that. Like, what do I show? Oh, I show too much. Let me pull away. Can you? I suspect that was probably going on in that relationship. Could you describe a little bit of that now that you have some distance from it?
Um, I will say that I'm someone who typically doesn't really support like major age gaps in relationships when the woman is too young and clearly naive due to like mental development and age to really understand what someone's intentions may be. But I'm not saying that does not mean that the older person, whether it's a man or woman, is always bad. It's just that we see it a lot. This was a case where it was incredibly healthy. When this guy was older than me, and when he found out how old I was, he was terrified of me.
Mm.
Like I am not one of those guys. Like he would not touch me for months. And he met my parents and was like, "I want you to know I'm not a creep." Like I I thought he was younger because he like looked really good for his age. So because we met on an airplane, like it was destined for this person to be in a certain chapter of my life to help me heal. If that makes sense, like I saw it from a spiritual perspective as well. And the more I shared about myself with him, the more he just stuck around and was like, "I'm here for you." And I was like, "You're not scared that I'm like damaged goods?" He's like, "No, no." And then we realized no matter how much he loved me, I really needed to work on myself, like on my relationship with myself.
Mm.
Because I was never single. I was always in like serious long term relationships. So I realized once that relationship ended, and we were friends for years after that, platonically. That was when I moved to New York and was like, I need to learn to be an adult alone. And like you were saying about resilience, okay? So like this doesn't work for everyone, but I'm going to tell you what worked for me. Physically pushing myself out of my comfort zone is what enabled me to mentally get my shit together and work on myself and really get to the healing, because healing is really uncomfortable. You know, talk therapy is amazing. We love it. But what are you doing outside of therapy?
100%. I actually refer to that, the term I use is taking a leap of faith. And what we know that trauma does is it distorts our worldview. It distorts the way we see our relationships, the way we see ourselves. And because of that, we often trap ourselves in these boxes. And so when I'm working with clients, I say what you just said, which is, I need you out of your comfort zone. I need you to trust that you have some of those resources. You're going to fail, but we knowing going, because that perfectionism, which I think I'm curious
I,
about as far as how
yeah,
that comes out as well for you, because that's one of the things I've seen a lot with my more successful trauma survivors, is that that's one of their coping mechanisms. So I'm interested to see how you navigated that, but to take the leap of faith, to do something different, to experiment, to see what works and what doesn't. Can I trust someone? Can I believe in myself that do I deserve this new job or this promotion or moving to a place that I've always wanted to go, or to be authentically who I am when I've always been told that I can't. And so for you, I guess going to New York was the leap of faith for you.
yes, it was the first time I had ever made any sort of change in my life without like a clear plan to know that I'm going to be safe. And I mean, I moved there knowing my sister already lived there and I had friends there, but like moving there and not even having a job lined up, where I ended up getting a job within a week. Like I figured it out, but at the same time, like I thought, oh, this isn't so scary. Like I can do this. Okay. The problem was I was still struggling mentally because I was in a big city and it may be New York is a very crowded big city, as you know. It can be the loneliest place on earth because you're surrounded by all these people who are always just like driven and they're like, we don't want to listen to your problems, like move forward. I felt so alone and I didn't want to feel like a burden on my sister. So I kept a lot of things inside until I started going to a psychiatrist there. And I said, look, I'm not okay on my own. Like, I need a little help. And that was when things started picking up where I was like, I've got to just work on healing myself. And trial and error. I mean, I was still giving myself in relationships and being taken advantage of as far as like people pleasing, right? That's what I jumped into as a trauma survivor. Like the people pleasing, because being bullied and abused multiple times made me strive to be accepted because I didn't accept myself for a long time. So I was like, even if I didn't like the people and I didn't even want to be friends with them, I was like, but I just need them to know that they like me. Like I need to be accepted. Right. So I actually went to Tanzania and volunteered at orphanages and taught English for a month. And I went by myself.
Wow.
And yeah,
What another leap of faith there, right?
yeah. I thought, you know what? Why not do
Zone.
for just to others? Because that's not in an ego way, but like when you help others, you're helping yourself. And I thought, why not strip away all the superficial stuff around me, right? Because I lived in a superficial city where I was surrounded by materialistic people. And I was like, how can my problems even like make sense if I'm just listening to people's other poor me fashion problems? Right? Like that's what it was. So I went to Tanzania by myself, but I was, with an organization there. Being around these people who even these children who had nothing. They had no roof to their house. They had no video games and they were so happy. And just being around that energy, I was like, my problems are so minuscule. Like not in that they don't matter, but like there are people finding happiness with nothing. I can't keep making excuses for what I need to be happy as far as getting it from external validation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
Ah, I,
External validation is, whether it's social media, being accepted by people, material items, things like that. And,
I actually refer to that as performance-based love, right? If
oh, yeah.
if I look a particular way, if I do achieve this particular skill, whether it's sports, whether it's my job, whether it's the materialistic thing, people will love me, right? It's that, like you said, external validation, and real love is not performance based. And
Yeah.
how can you be in a relationship just being me, which is that whole premise of intimacy, right? You probably have heard the term "into me I see." That's what intimacy. So it's really looking in the depth, like in Avatar. I see you. When in that moment that they say, and I just love that whole, especially for people who've experienced relational trauma, because they haven't experienced that. Because once that trauma has happened, and your story is very common in that you just don't tell.
No.
You don't feel like you can for a variety of reasons until you get to that depth of despair, like I can't hold it anymore. And,
Yeah. I
and
didn't even know how much it was even affecting my life until I
what
talked
you're
to,
all the time, yeah. And it's
like, I didn't even know until my parents were like, this makes sense. Like, this is why she was acting out as a teenager more
right,
than a normal
right,
would. Like, this is why she was so angry and sad. And like, you know, I'm I made up for it. I remember like when I changed my relationship with my parents where we could then talk really openly about all this stuff. I was like, I'm sorry for like being mean to you when I was a teenager. They're like, it's okay. Like we're the safe people to be a punching bag because a lot of people go through this stuff and they don't have anybody.
right. Or they lose
So
their because of it,
it,
especially with addiction. type B, you know, because I operate from more from a trauma lens as it relates to addiction. I'm a trauma therapist, so I understand my bias. I'll own
Or,
it. But I see it much more as a function of avoidance. You were talking about I kept running away from my problems by doing these things. And to me, that is avoidance. And we have a tendency in our society to judge people who use sex, who use drugs, who use work, or who use these gambling as those forms of avoidance as a judgment. And then we, as I refer to it, as it's the shiny object. We always talk about the shiny object as opposed to what are we running from? What's in here? I'm much more curious about what's in here. And it's
mhm,
interesting because my clients that come to me, I remember working with a client, relatively new client, came to me because my specialty is male survivors, and he had been a meth addict. And he came to me, and literally the first thing he did when he came up and sat on my couch was, "Hey, I had anonymous sex this weekend." And I'm like, "Well, that's an interesting statement." I'm like, well, so after he told me, I'm like, "So help me understand why you're sharing this story." Now, mind you, it was probably my third session. I didn't know him that well. And he's like,
mhm.
"Well, the CMA movement, the for people who struggle with meth, that's their 12-step program. Um, the anonymous sex is a precursor, a red flag to the use." So he was immediately like, "You," I interpreted it as you need to beat me up to get me back on track so that I don't fall down this slippery slope. As opposed to where I went with it is, so what's going on in your world where you needed that kind of validation? Like what there's meaning behind this behavior, and I'm much more interested in that. And I said,
Mhm.
if you need to do the 12 step stuff, go to the 12, but you're not going to get that from me. I'm going to be much more curious about
What
what's,
group?
and there was
Yeah.
an event that had happened earlier in that week. And as with many survivors, we seek out this external validation to say, I'm okay, right? If I'm good enough, then
Mhm,
happen. And it really put on some light bulbs for him about how to do this differently.
mhm.
So
Absolutely.
I appreciate,
I
I got a little,
even though protective mechanisms became healthier on the outside, it was still like not really opening me up. As in, once I ended up getting into survival mode because not only was I in survival mode of like, I will never let anyone hurt me again, basically, like,
that
I
walls are up.
I was very much in like masculine energy of like, I've got to survive because, but it was also the first time in my life I'd ever been financially independent, like moving to New York, and I had to teach myself everything. So I was like, I'm not going to have debt, I'm not going to be hurt. And I put on this like almost male boss cap of like, I'm fine, I'm good, like I'm going to get through it, when I was afraid to soften in a way. And up until that point, even in my intimate relationships, I could only enjoy myself if I was actually being abused
Hmm.
sexually. Like, even though I experienced sexual abuse as a kid, like I had to have pain to have pleasure, not in a way where it's like experimental, as in like that was the only way I could enjoy myself. And it wasn't until I was dating somebody when I was about 26 years old in New York, and he's like, "Whoa, slow down. Like, let's connect with me. Like, connect with me." And I was like, "You want to connect with me? Like, our hearts?" Because before it was just like a love bombing, right? Like, they would love bomb me, and I'd be like, "Oh my God." And then it was the physical act of being intimate with someone was robot to me. I would put on the act, but to me, there was no, it was just robotic. Like, I just want to think about nothing. It was almost like, to me, it was healing until it was over, and then I felt worse about myself.
Hmm.
This is why a lot of people, even men, when they act out on this, like, you feel great in the moment because you're like, oh, this person's giving me attention, this person cares about me, this person's filling up my empty cup. But then it's over, and you're like, wait, I'm with myself again. And that's what made me stop doing drugs too and not get addicted. Was I remember getting sick, and I woke up one morning, and I was like, this is how people get addicted to drugs. They wake up sober, feeling like crap, and they think, "Oh, I'm going to use again or drink again," right?
Make me feel good
I
again.
I told myself, I was like, nothing is going to work then. Because I was thinking, I was like, nothing will work. Like nothing externally will work because I'm going to keep waking up with myself every day. So why not work on liking the person I'm waking up with sober and not, masking it and like, oh, I just want to feel nothing, which is what it was like to like use or, have sex. So it was when this person made me slow down and actually learn how to like feel comfortable with intimacy with myself and with another person. I was like, whoa, this is a new world of being healthy. Healthy relationships. Even if I had dated nice people who were nice to me, right? At this point, because I knew that's what I deserved, I was still being mean to myself.
Well, I would imagine even sometimes maybe even sabotaging the relationship because I don't deserve it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I certainly was because, like I said, I was in this survival mode that I met people that were like, let me take care of you and help you feel safe. And I was like, no, I don't trust anyone. I'm going to be abandoned. No, I can't trust anyone, man or woman, whether it's a job or relationship, somebody's going to abandon me. So then I was, of course, up to that point, I was very much anxious attachment style because I had so much anxiety over abandonment, right? Because I'd
Right.
been
Yeah.
abandoned by others, abandoning myself. But that was when I almost did like 180 and I became avoidant, where I was like afraid to be close to people. And that was when I did another thing of pushing myself out of my comfort zone again. I went to Peru by myself on a plant medicine retreat.
Oh, well, that's an interesting thing. So I've got now I've got I want to do some of my questions, but I want to
Yeah,
get my
sorry,
medicine.
this has been a continuous
The
story.
oh,
A long,
you've been fabulous. You interview very well and relatively easy for me, so I very much appreciate that. I wanted you to talk a little bit about your neurodivergent, or your Asperger autism spectrum disorder, whatever we're calling it these days. How does
I
that,
know.
how do you think that impacted your trauma and your trauma recovery? If you can articulate that.
Yes. So, I didn't know until, so I was diagnosed on the autism spectrum over a year ago, and that's how recent.
Wow.
But
So
my
the
parents,
blends together for you.
yeah, ADHD, we always knew. I was officially diagnosed when I was 15 years old because, funny enough, I was born and partially raised in Tokyo, Japan. And when I was in Japan, I was in a Japanese school before I went to international school. So I was a minority during a period of my life. And my parents were like, wear whatever you want, be your own person. They really wanted me to embrace my individuality and not try to conform. And
Mm.
I always like love them for that because they knew that something was going on a little different with me versus myself. And so they're like, you want to wear a bridal veil to school? Go right ahead. Because I
That's
agree
pretty good for me. Yes.
in this Japanese class. So my like, you want to dress up, like do whatever makes you feel free and happy and express yourself. It was when I moved to the States during my childhood that things really changed. I spoke 3 languages. I played piano recitals all over Japan. And I was like very excelled in reading and everything until once I moved to the States. That was when I felt really weird with myself. Like I felt very awkward. That was when I realized something, I'm different.
Mm.
And I had to try to fit in.
Was that the same time that the abuse started?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The started a couple of years before I moved to the States, but I
Right.
would spend summers with this family in the States. And the guy was 5 years older than me. So that's why it was so weird because when it ended, he was a teenager and I was a little kid,
Right.
which is still like obviously disgusting, but like
It's a
that's why it's so weird to talk about because I would always hear stories about like an adult and a kid. So like for me, I'm like, well, a teenager may just like not know better. And my parents are like, no, it's not okay. Same with the therapist, like, it's not okay. So we always knew something was up, and my parents kept sending me to doctors, and they're like, oh, she must just have like a learning disability. Like, we don't really know.
Mm.
And then I was diagnosed with the ADHD, where I got untimed tests, untimed exams in school, which was very helpful for my learning. But then my parents are like, why is she doing so horribly here, but she's like in college level here? Like, why is she reading Stephen King in third grade? Like what's going on? But I wanted so badly to fit in that I basically gave up. I spoke American Sign Language, German, Japanese, and English. I gave up everything, gave up piano because I just wanted to fit in with the American kids. And it's too bad because that was my real like expression of myself, to like be true to who I was. So I went through school struggling, never fitting in, and that kind of feeds into like being a really good victim. I hate
Does
saying the word victim because victim mentality is something I absolutely hate.
Well,
Um,
what I would say, the word I, because I do too. I'm not a, I definitely am from a survivor stance,
oh,
but coming at it from a more of a vulnerable population, that those things put you at risk for being vulnerable, and offenders take advantage of vulnerable people. So to me, it's not necessarily a victim stance, right? A victim stance is when we choose to stay in it, even today, when I have all of those resources. That's whereas in the
yes.
place that I was at, and based on the resources that I thought that I had, I was vulnerable.
Yeah,
And as you
I
said,
love
the need
it's
to
more about, yeah, it's more about like what are you going to do with it now, because what makes me really sad is when I see people like stuck in that victim mentality of like poor me. And it wasn't until I went to that program and the therapist told me like stop the poor me attitude in a nice loving way, like stop the poor me attitude, which was a great way to describe it, because it was like, yes, poor me that these horrible things happened to me because I was a victim, but like, do I really want to let what happened to me control my happiness for the rest of my life?
you have that controlling the narrative is how I refer to that. And then now
So
what? Now that
so
now what am I?
victim, and this, now the more studies they're doing on neurodivergence, obviously, and how it like, it's partially, it can be connected to like your gut health, and like it's something that other people saw in me that like I didn't know. They just, because to me they looked at me and they're like, oh, you're a freak, we're gonna bully you, because I had a couple friends, so I thought maybe I could play off being normal. But other people see what's going on before you do.
Yeah.
And so they see that vulnerability and that naive disposition. I was very naive, where they're like, oh, I can take advantage of this. I can play with this. Ah, okay.
Yep.
And the ADHD is obviously, we beat ourselves up all the time for not being able to process information like other people. Therefore, we tend to have very low self esteem,
Right.
which makes us easy prey through adolescence and
Well,
adulthood, in
correct.
the place, in relationships, friendships, in all of it. So I knew about, the ADHD. I'm going through that, and then learning to work with it. But it was when I found like my real passion in life, which was like cooking and helping people through health, healing myself with food and doing things like the healthy way, right? That was when I was like, oh, this is where I feel calm and like focused, and like this is good for my brain. Like, this is good for my healing. Um, and that was when, after then, I wanted to dive deeper into some real hardcore healing, and that was when I went to Peru.
So,
And look,
and
I know
I don't think
that
people know what plant medicine treatment is. So could you share a little bit about that, and then tell us about your?
I know a lot of people have mixed thoughts, because I have friends who are sober and they're like, I personally wouldn't do that. But then I have friends who are sober and they've done like ketamine, doctor administered healing for depression, because it actually seriously helped them. For me,
MDMA, another one that they're psilocybin. I mean, there's quite a few
yeah,
things they are exploring.
I was, I had never used any like psychedelic, even though when I was, doing drugs in the past, like I was using like speed and cocaine and like marijuana, like all that in an unhealthy way. But I had never used a psychedelic because I knew that my brain was different and I was a little scared. So I then decided that after a year of research, I was going to go on an ayahuasca retreat.
Mm.
And um, I made sure I was safe because I was going alone, and these people took such good care of me, and it changed my life. And I would say the reason why was not because of the plant alone, it was because I did something that was really scary and really I noticed this with a lot of people that I deal with socially and professionally is a lot of people, whether they've experienced trauma or not, a lot of us have a fear of losing control. It's human, it's a human need for safety, right? Like we need to be safe.
Right.
We keep each other safe, we need to think about our safety. um we have a fear of losing control. And in other way, it can become a mental prison for people when they never try something new. They never get out of their comfort zone. And I'm not saying with like a plant medicine, I mean like in any aspect of their life. They're afraid to maybe something happened and they're like, I will never get on an airplane again,
Mhm.
or something, right? Like something like that. Um, they stay in this mindset of being comfortable. So for me,
They
the
think
plant,
that they control all the variables, they'll be safe, which, but of course,
yeah,
that's the opposite.
what it did for me. I did 5 ceremonies in Peru, and then I did another one in the States. And um, it only took 3 to like fully have a serious effect on me. But I will say that more than what the plant did medicinally, it was the fact that I had done something that was so out of the norm for me. Like I let go for the first time. It was just letting go of control and being like, okay.
But I think it's really important for people who are listening to understand that by it's not about doing it; it's doing it in context with people who could keep you safe, right? These were trained
I
professionals
really
that
emphasize.
the ability.
Yeah.
And this is where my relationship based stuff really matters because we can't do it by ourselves. We have to do it in context of others, and that the whole ayahuasca journey is very much about relationship. And I don't know if you're familiar with PCIP, but it's a psychedelic treatment model. They're testing it out in Colorado because it's there's a level of legality there, and it basically is using the hallucinogen in context of the relationship as the container so that you know that you're safe, which the ayahuasca kind of does that as well. And I just, to me, you're a lot of the things that you're saying really validates what I already believe. Now, that, again, this may be my bias because I'm picking the things, which again, I'll own my own, but I
It
really
certainly,
appreciate your
that
story.
what I noticed as well was during my research, I did research on when doctors in Northern Europe were using like LSD and even psilocybin on terminally ill patients,
Mm.
and found that when they were administering it and they were monitoring it very safely, with professionals, these people lost fear of death.
Yes. I,
And I
I
thought,
read a
wow.
journal on that. Yes.
And while I was, while this was years ago, and like I was like, well, I am young, having that feeling of losing that level of fear, I want to have that. Like I want to have that feeling of being okay, right? And not depending on a plant to do that for me, but more like I would love to like figure out how to get myself to that point. So it did that. It I lost fear in my second ceremony, and I was with people that kept me really safe. The shamans had over 30 years of experience working with the plant. And now, look, living in Los Angeles, I'm sure you hear stories too, and we see it in the media. It's kind of a laughing matter of how people kind of abuse plant medicine healing.
As they do everything, right?
Yeah.
What do they
So
call it? The spiritual bypass, right? Well, if I'll just do this
some
every.
people use it to try to manipulate and control others, or they want to feel like it's for their own ego. So they're like, well, I'm a shaman. I studied for a month. And it's like, I can I can go through the most vulnerable experience you'll ever have in your life besides birth and death.
Yeah.
I, people tell me they do these ceremonies. They're like, well, I didn't have a good experience, and like, it cost this much. And I'm like, oh my God, no, you need to go to like a real safe place like Peru, Costa Rica, or Brazil or Mexico. But you need to do your research and make sure, like, I'm so glad that I went to a place that they really babied me to make sure I was safe. And during that journey, the shamans were like, "You have very high tolerance for this stuff." I was like, "Yeah, I figured that out." But but It really helped change my mindset because I came back to New York, broke my lease, packed up my stuff, and was like, I need to stick to what I really want to do with my life. And I moved out of New York, like in 3 weeks, like that. And like you were saying with the resilience, I feel like that was almost the last hump of really pushing me to really be comfortable being uncomfortable. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You know what? I would be a little curious, because one of the elements I know about ADD is that ADD people have a tendency to be risk takers, and I wonder if your ADD element is actually a resource in your trauma recovery, because it helps you take those leap of faith to do those things that are a little outside of the box. Because the other element of ADD is we're novelty seekers. We like new things. So not just we like the novel experience because right we encode it differently, and the way you describe your journey, and it's very typical, and this is one of the things I talk to with my clients is that we hit plateaus in our recovery. So, and that's fine, we can go a year or two with no therapy. What you decide as your end game is up to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm 54 years old and I go back and forth as I navigate my trauma narrative and how it presents. I mean, all in all, I have a great life. Things are really wonderful. However, there are these moments that, especially the more subtle, what I refer to as more the insidious stuff that occurs in relational trauma, that they show up that I never saw before, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm feeling this
Yeah.
feeling. Where is this coming from? And so to take another level of journey that I could never have done before, similar to
Yeah.
your going to the outward bound, to taking the risk of telling the story, to recognizing the drug and alcohol and the sex and how that wasn't working for you, doing the ayahuasca journey, all of these layer after layer, recognizing the relationships, how they're helpful, how they're not. And each step gets you closer to wherever it is that you want. Now, in my world, you're still very young. And so who knows what other plateaus.
Well, what I've noticed more is once I broke through, like getting through, like I don't I don't say it because I don't have shame anymore. So I don't like to say it in a shameful way of like the getting down and dirty, like with my with the trauma, but getting through the muck. Like once I got through the muck, the quicksand, it really was like quicksand, like holding me back. So I was trying to move forward and hold me back because it was comfortable back there, right? Once I got through that step and I would notice other triggers I have, like even today, like other triggers I noticed, it made me like have no more shame dealing with what I noticed was triggering me. Like once I got over the worst part, now it's like, look, I will never be this like complete being. None of us are. But now when I notice things that I want to work on in myself, where I'm like, oh, this is holding me back from something that like would make me happier or like would make my relationship with other people better or would make me have less anxiety. When I notice these things now, I don't say, God, I can't believe you haven't figured this out yet. Like my old like thought process, right? Was like get it together, like, God, you're such an idiot. Now it's like, oh, this is interesting.
I know. Is that
How
not the best ever? To go from beating yourself up like you stupid fool, I can't believe you did that, to wow, that's an interesting. I wonder what's going on there. What a
notice it on the
beautiful
app.
shift that. Yeah.
Like we
Thank you.
look really easy for any of us to come across things that are on our For You page and like it triggers us, right? It's easy because especially with the ADHD and the autism, like I have a temper, except nobody really. It's one of those things where like my mom sees it, but even partners I've had, they don't really see my temper because I tend to want so badly to regulate myself all the time because I'm used to having to constantly be like calming myself down and regulating. And people don't know how much chaos is like going on internally all the time.
Right.
Even long term partners I've had, they've never seen me like, I've never taken it out on anyone because like my mom has been the only person I felt safe really like being angry at. Does that make sense? Like being really angry and like yelling at and being like, "Oh, she's not going to run away, so it's okay." So I
Exactly.
hide my anger. And I've realized that a lot of time anger is a protective mechanism that we use. Like, I noticed that's why on social media we see anger first when really it's coming from you're embarrassed, you're insecure about something, you're hurt, your feelings are hurt. A man will hear something that triggers him and lash out in anger, or a woman will argue with someone. I try to regulate myself and say, I want to speak on that, but before I do, I want to reflect instead of um, react. More reflecting before responding, less reacting. It's a really hard thing to do. I have to work on it every day. What I do is, even if somebody in my social life like is doing something like cruel or hurtful, writing is a way I like to express myself. Some people, you may have patients who like to play music, or I listen to music, but like they do something healthy like yoga, like whatever. For me, writing is my therapy. I write out everything I want to say out of anger, but I never send it. I never share it. I delete it the next day. But just getting it out of my system is so necessary, because if I keep it bottled up, then I will blow up.
Well, so beautiful resource.
Yeah. So with the, like you were saying about like the journey of being diagnosed as well, like so with the autism side, it wasn't until I was seeing two doctors regularly in LA, a psychologist and a psychiatrist. And I was talking to them just as someone with ADHD and some anxiety. And they both separately were like, hey, I hope this doesn't like offend you in any way, but like you seem really curious to understand your brain better. Like in a way where you want to love yourself more. You know, like you want to take better care of yourself always. So clearly, like you should be open to this information. We would like to test you um, for autism. And I was like, I never thought of that. And I ended up scoring like an 8 out of 10 on everything. But once I got that, I felt so much anger. And I
Oh,
don't know, I had so much anger when I was diagnosed, not at the doctors, not at myself, at all the teachers I had in school who told me I was stupid, or that overdoing it on an assignment, like writing a book when it was supposed to be a short story, meant that I was like too dumb to listen. And just feeling less than because of other adults in my life who were just like beating on me for being different, when if I had known back then what I know now, my life wouldn't have been so hard in
mhm.
ways. But you
Well, and again, that's one of the things that I want to promote on my page is instead of being judgmental, like what's wrong with you, like can we move to that place of curiosity of like what's going on now? In the trauma lens, we talk about what's instead of what's wrong with you, what happened to you, and I appreciate that from the trauma lens, but in your particular case, not only do you have trauma history, but you have this biological and temperament phenomenon that expresses itself as well, and that we really need to be curious about both of those things, and getting to the point of what's showing up when, and
uh,
how, by having that knowledge, like you said, that curious stance, our ability to be able to navigate our world, our relationships, ourselves becomes much more effective.
so I had that anger for a couple weeks, and then my doctors both, the psychologist was like, I don't she was like, look, if you want to join a women's support group to like not feel alone, I can recommend it. It's free. And she's like, or just keep talking to me. And then my psychiatrist was like, you need to read this book that'll help you understand and actually respect yourself more for what's going on, and realize that like we can turn this into a superpower for you.
I know.
And done is like realize where it's a strength and like why it made me different. And now I feel really confident with it, but at the same time, part of me, it's made me a little cautious in getting close to people, just because um I feel more vulnerable in a way, um because I know that like I just have natural tendencies of how I read things. I'm not very good at reading social cues.
Right, right.
I'm trying. that. But it's made me more curious about psychology in general, honestly, which is kind of how we got connected. Was like I was fascinated by your work and what you're doing, and I became obsessed with it because I was like, I have these deficiencies, but I'm not going to let it control like how I how I express myself in the world and deal with people. I would like to learn more about like how I can work on myself and help people. And like you were saying, like being a risk taker as a neurodivergent, it did help me get out of my comfort zone easier
Mhm.
than maybe a little person would. But at the same time, it made me realize that like I was putting myself in more danger than like I realized at times.
This one.
Like
Yep.
Jaro with no experience and no training. Like I've done crazy stuff like that where I'm maybe I should be dead, but like I'm okay and I'm here. But
Well, and you're teaching us,
it's
you know.
understanding people.
Yeah. So I want to be respectful of your time. So I see Annette, you are here, and I know Annette, you were a little bit late joining us. So BMW
Oh,
help out as well.
he
Do we
has.
do we have
I'm
any?
happy.
I'm asking to see if there were any questions for you.
People are asking me about my skincare routine. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, please
I
share. Yes.
I'm healthy. I mean, I there are certain products I don't use all the fancy stuff I used to. Basically, I believe that everything starts internally. So living a healthy plant-based lifestyle and look like even though I've been, vegan for 10 years and I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs, that's all the internal stuff that's like going to make it a lot better. But at the same time, I believe in living a life of balance. So I work with people who have different eating styles than myself because like I need to maintain my career and I
You
want
are
people
chef after all. Yes.
life to the fullest where they're doing the healthiest version of how they enjoy living their life. If that makes sense, like not completely depriving themselves of things that aren't very harmful, but are like I believe that if you go hardcore and you cut things out, you want it more.
Yeah. So one of the questions I have here actually is someone that I've already interviewed. Tim is his name, and one of his moments of his disclosure was is that he actually went away for about 2 hours from his hometown, and that's when he disclosed for the first time his story. And I think
Oh,
he was like 27 actually when he told his story for the first time of something that happened to him when he was a child. He is curious about how your uh, your retreats and those efforts, is it about being out of your natural environment that kind of gives you the space to be more vulnerable? And he's also asking if it impacts you on being just on vacation, like since you like these are two different kinds of stances. Do you have any
uh,
on that?
I will say that I've known people throughout my life, and like I used to do this too, where you think that in order to get away from your problems, you have to move to a new city or you have to go on vacation, right? Like that's going to fix everything, right? Like all you need is a little fresh air, a little nature. I mean, I find nature to be incredibly healing in that it helps quiet the thoughts down. Turning off my phone, going on a hike. I do that even just for the day. Luckily, living in LA, I can just drive somewhere and like do that. But I would say that going on a retreat where I was literally stripped of all material possessions, like I had no mirror, I had no razor, I had no makeup, no phone, no fashion, nothing. To be stripped of everything that I love to express myself, like in a healthy way. Like I love to express myself with like fashion and art and things like that. But at the same time, there was no distraction because there was no phone, no nothing. I was able to really like be present. And I know that a lot of people go to rehab programs where they're allowed to have a phone or like they have, a comfy room. If it still works for them, okay, that's great. Like whatever works for you. But I really think that something I've realized that I've noticed a lot, and tell me if you've noticed this too. But this is just something I've noticed through being, I am a millennial, but I'm surrounded by Gen Zs a lot, and I love seeing people feel less alone on social media. to talk about mental health. I absolutely love that people are feeling safer, admitting like they're not okay, and then saying, oh, there's someone else who feels the same way. Oh, amazing. I'm not alone. It's when people get to a point where they're like self diagnosing or they are seeing something and saying, oh, I can use this as an excuse for my behavior.
That's my trigger.
Right. And that was when I knew that the way I talk about being neurodivergent in any form, like when I say, when I'm relating a story and I say, being neurodivergent, this is how like my brain thinks. I don't say it as like, well, I have an excuse because like this. It's
Yeah,
more like I,
no,
that this is how I process this, but I'm functioning in a neurotypical world, so I'm going to suck it up and like figure out a way to do this better, right? Like, how can I function better instead of saying, "Oh, poor me, you should give me special treatment because of like this, and that." And I've noticed this a lot, even when I had jury duty recently, and the amount of people who did not get called for jury duty, I was, who were telling their background stories that were completely unnecessary for jury duty because they wanted people to have a pity party over it, where it's like, it made me sad because it's like I want to see people grow and heal, and it's almost like we need a happy medium between tough love and gentle love. Do you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
we need to be gentle and kind and show people that they're not alone and it's a safe place, but at the same time we need to be like, okay, like, are you tired of your own shit?
right.
Because
Yeah,
we are.
my thing is that, and this is kind of my treatment process, is we've got to validate the story. I need to understand the story and how it shows up today, and then we need to make a decision about what are we going to do with this information. Like, so what's the next step, and then how do we go there? What's your dream, and let's
Yeah,
reality. Like,
yeah,
restrict ourselves, and when we begin to unrestrict ourselves because of the narrative that we've created, wow, the world can really open up. And you said yourself, you began to see your neurodivergency as a superpower, your ADD as a superpower, and
yeah,
that's the kind of stuff, and that's really the messaging of these interviews. Of really what I want to do is I want people to recognize quirkiness, which is how I label those things,
yeah.
the gift.
Yes,
Own your
yes,
gift, and how do we use it as something that's going to make us stand out above everyone else, that
yes. When
allows
I
us
see
to be seen.
children and adolescents who are really uncomfortable with themselves, I'm like, it's okay. Like, don't like being cool doesn't matter. Like, I know it seems like it matters because you want to fit in and you don't want to feel alone, but like, honestly, embrace your individuality and like what makes you you, because it can then progress like your healing to like want to be your best self and really loving yourself. And it took a long time for me to get there, but now like it's my goal every day. And I know you have questions, but there's one last little thing I want to mention that I've noticed is one thing I've broken through more recently is a fear of success.
Oh, yeah. So tell us about that. That's a very common theme, right? That the self sabotage, as I refer to it.
I would self-sabotage, but not by screwing up, almost by like making excuses of why I wasn't ready yet.
Mm,
Why I wasn't ready to put myself out there yet, like I didn't look right, or I wasn't educated enough. I couldn't afford it. I didn't have enough money to like get myself to where I was. Like I kept making excuses, and finally, and right after New Year's, my manager was like, "Okay, like you need to stop making excuses and put yourself out there because like you have something to share and like you should try to use a platform to help people like you enjoy doing. Stop being so afraid." And I realized that's a protective mechanism a lot of us do. As you know, trauma survivor, once you get over the hump of like real deep healing, it's then like, wait, I've got to protect myself from pain. And it's very strange because I did not experience rejection a lot growing up, like especially in relationships. I wasn't really rejected by men ever. I was bullied, but I wasn't really like rejected by friends, so I didn't really know what rejection was like. So thinking about being rejected was a terrifying thought. Thinking about someone not accepting me, I was like, that means I'm not worthy. That means I'm a
right,
bad person.
right.
But then when I started progressing in my career and like facing rejection, I was like, it's not so bad. Like it's okay. So now that's kind of helped me get over that, is like not fearing rejection has helped me like stop fearing success and just like putting myself out there and being like, hey, I'm going to love myself like no matter what happens. It's okay.
Yeah. And it is the fine balance because a lot of what I'm hearing is more some of that people pleasing element as well, right? I can't be rejected if you like me, right? What can I do to get you to like me? So please don't reject.
Yeah. Or if they were, what's wrong with me? I have to change myself to fit the mold of like what people think I should be. And now it's like, who cares? As long as you're being a kind person, and I firmly believe in kindness over just niceness now because kindness is fair, it's honest, it's true. Because when you're kind, you're helping people. When you're just nice, you're enabling. You're saying whatever they're doing is okay, whether it's healthy or not.
Yeah, there's a clip right there. That was good.
Oh,
I've not heard that before. I love
don't
that.
have any other questions? But I'm sorry
I,
if I've taken
I
your
don't
time.
see any other questions here. I did have, and this is a weird question, so pardon my weirdness. And also, I see it's 8:15. You're okay with time?
I'm okay with time. Yes.
And I know this is a weird question, but I love difficult uh, questions. So you're a very attractive woman. How do you navigate your attractiveness in your recovery as it relates to your the fact that you sexualized yourself and the balance between and again I feel awkward saying this, but I'm a gay man,
No.
so it's
Okay.
okay. Is that you're one of those people that you would look towards, right? Your attractiveness is, and I'm sure you've heard this many times before. But how do you navigate that as it related to your sexuality and your beauty today?
It was very weird because when I was younger, before I like puberty and all that, I was very much like a tomboy. Like I was very feminine, but I was like a tomboy. So I played sports, so that made me feel very like I never thought about my physicality because for me it was just about how I was using my body in sports. Like I was a national competitive athlete, and so for me that was like therapeutic in a way because I wasn't thinking about what I looked like or how other people saw me because it was about like, are you good at this thing? Like no one cares if you're hot or not, right? But then when I started getting sexualized from such a young age, it made me feel like on one side embarrassed, but on the other side I guess that's all I am. In
Mhm.
a way, like on one side, I was really loving what was going on. Like, for example, like when I was a teenager and my body was changing, right? I looked at it as like, oh my God, like I've been dreaming of this, of being a woman. I want to own it and embrace it and feel beautiful. But then the way boys would talk to me and look at me, I was like, they're never going to think I'm beautiful because they're just going to see me as like a piece of meat.
An object.
That's all I'm worth. So I thought of myself that way, and I so badly wanted to feel like beautiful though. And that happened later on when I started letting people see me for like who I was instead of trying to fit a mold all the time. But I will say that through my recovery, I now, when I was a people pleaser, I saw any attention as the same, right? It was attention. So whether it was like feeling validation because a guy hit on me or someone whistling at me and be like, oh my gosh, I would act all, humble about it because like I knew that I was like attractive, but I was still like, I don't want to be one of those like egomaniac people because I thought, oh, I would become then the person who bullied me, the girls who bullied me, the people I hate.
Mm.
But at the same time, that was my sense of validation was getting any sort of attention. But I never dressed myself in a way for like male attention. It was more like I want to feel hot and good, right? But if I didn't get the attention I wanted, I didn't feel worthy.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was a line because then after that, when I started really doing the healing and realizing like, yeah, sexualizing myself like didn't get me anywhere, I started to become disgusted when people led with sex with me. And that's how I am now. Is like when people lead with sexuality over like just physical appearance, like when they're talking to me, when they, like if a guy at a bar is like grabbing me or whatever, I used to be like, I giggle and just like push them away. Now I'm like, excuse me, this is my bubble. You're not invited to my bubble. Like you have to earn. This is like my little comfort bubble because now that I have a better relationship with myself, I see myself more as like, I guess you could say it's like, I have my own sacred energy and other people do too. So we should think about like, do you really want to share that energy talking to someone who doesn't respect you, or giving your body to someone who doesn't respect you? So that's enabled me to have way more like self-discipline and self-respect, because I will say it's easy to go on social media and compare yourself to people.
Mhm.
And here there's a lot of people say really mean things to me all the time. I delete the comments, but people pick up my appearance all the time just because they can, right? And I used to let it get to me. And I used to work with this media company where I was like, you need to Photoshop my videos. Like, you need to make me look 20 years younger. Like, you need to make me look perfect. And they're like, you look fine. But then I realized, like, shouldn't I care about what I look like? So now I feel like so much more comfortable in my skin. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to trust people because I'm used to every male interaction is a guy trying to sleep with me. Like every single one. Like whether except my gay friends and like doctors and like teachers, right? They never were like inappropriate with me. But like in general, every other male interaction was people just sexualizing me and trying to sleep with me. So that still happens all the time.
Yes.
I just deal
But
with it.
have this comfort bubble. I love your narrative as far as your boundaries and what is and isn't acceptable, as opposed to the flirtatious. No, 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 no. Like, no, this is my space. I did not invite you in this space. Thank you very much, but no, thank you. That's great.
The hardest part is like I think a lot of people when they start feeling comfortable telling their story to you, you know, like going to you for therapy or telling social media. Once they get there, they're like, "This is me being raw and real." They, it's almost like I got to a point where I was like, I really want people to understand me. Like I really want people to understand me so badly that it was almost like seeking validation in that way of like being understood, because I meet a lot of people and they assume I was like a popular cheerleader in school,
Mhm.
that I have an easy life, right, of privilege, and that I've never had trauma in my life. I've had an easy life. How could I have ever been unhappy and hated myself? Because they see the outside.
Right.
And part of me was like, I need to share more and be like, look at how imperfect I am. Like, look at how like what I've endured. And I was just like, who freaking cares? Because that's seeking validation still.
Other
So,
way.
like, you know what? If people want to get to know me better, they can ask me questions, just like they're asking us on this live.
Right.
If they want to have a certain perception of me in their head of who I am, I can't force them to change that. That's not my job, you know? So that's something I've realized more recently that I'm dealing with.
And again, that's part of the journey, right? We're always getting more and more. So one last question before we
Sure.
go. They asked about how did you find the retreats? What kind of resource did you go to find that? Is that more of connections, or were you able to Google that? How did you find those things?
So, I will say that in a way it can be hit or miss. I don't know if you've heard about like Paris Hilton's story of how she went to one of these camps, but it
Oh,
ended up being like
I
school
saw that about a couple of months ago, but I didn't go deeper into it.
abusive where she went. And it reminds me of where I went when I was sent to Montana when I was 15, where they made us do like physical labor with injuries and like we were malnourished to the point where like my parents almost didn't recognize me when they saw me. Like that was horrible. But what was strange was the therapist I had at the time, they came across the place and they were like, I think this would be right for you. They didn't know a single person who'd ever been to this program.
Wow.
They basically were like, this seems legit. Like, you should go. My parents ended up suing the program because of like how they treated me. Because
Wow.
another girl had gone through the same, like, we both were the most, like, we were the least bad kids there. So our, like, we're not just
Not what
being
I signed up for. Yeah.
the same. And our parents were like, something serious is going on. Like, yes, we wanted our children to like learn their lessons, but like, this is abuse. And so they sued the program. Now, this one, Second Nature Entrada, is the name of the program I went to when I was 18. It's still around, I think. It's based in Utah. They have an adolescent program and they have an adult program. The adult program is for ages 18 to 25, and it's for therapy like it was for me, but it's also for people with addictions. And the therapist who had sent me there, the one who said, "You can't bullshit me," um, she knew for a fact that these people were legit. And I knew from the moment I got there, I was like, I'm not going to get away with anything with these people. And so that was what I needed. It was great. So I would say do your research and make sure that they are actually doing the therapy work along with, because they sell you on being in nature, right? You're going to be in nature. You're going to get so healthy and go hiking and stuff. Like they need to emphasize like how intense the work is going to be to do.
Well, and the biggest advice that I'm hearing you is talk to someone who's been through the program that had a
Yeah.
connection with the experience, as opposed to what the just the literature that you're reading. There was another question that came up. It was, what's your relationship like with your parents today?
We're very close. I mean, my parents were married for 31 years before they divorced, and I will say, like, it was kind of weird dealing with divorced parents as an adult because my sister and I had already moved out of the house, but there's no perfect time because my parents are like, should we have done it sooner or like waited? And I was like, look, there's no perfect time. I have very close relations with both my parents, but my dad feels shame for not protecting me as a father from like the stuff that happened to me, where he kind of like pushes it away, not pretending it never happened, but like we don't talk about it.
Painful for him, yeah.
My mom is way more connected to me emotionally, and so she's very like, what can I do to be a better mom? Like what can I do to like to and she's working on her own healing with herself too, with her own things. And we become incredibly close through that, where she's seen me go through all this stuff and been so supportive. And my sister's my best friend, and she lives in New York, but she's a neurotypical, like amazing, incredible, accomplished, brilliant woman. And she definitely had to see a lot of me going through pain. I would say I taught her everything not to do growing up.
Now, are you the big sister?
I'm the big sister. So typically the big sister is like
The
the
super,
mom,
yeah,
like the
yeah.
one. I mean, I definitely wasn't. She was. But what this is like, I've never wanted to be her and she's never wanted to be me. We've always loved each other for who we are individually. And it's helped us really respect each other. And she's very protective of me. Like if a guy wants to date me, he has to meet her, like, and go through her because she's seen me hurt and she knows that I'm really strong now. But she's like, nobody hurts my sister. Like, so I appreciate that. It's nice.
Well,
And I have real core healthy friendships now. I don't have a lot of friends, but the friends I have are amazing.
that's what matters. That is.
Yeah.
I thank you so much for sharing your story.
Of
You
course.
were very vulnerable tonight, and as I continue down this journey, I hope everyone interviews as easily as you did. You were terrific tonight, and if you ever want to come back, if you when you write that book and you want to promote, I'll have a big audience by then, and we will sell the hell out
Oh,
of it.
well, if there's ever like a specific subject that you want to address that we can have a discussion on, I'm completely open to that too.
I love that. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that. I will keep it on my list.
Today because I was giving you the background and all that, but I'm happy to discuss anything specific anytime if you need.
Well, I mean, the first thing that pops in my head is the nutrition and mental health. I think that's such a great and underserved topic, and that might be something that we can come back to at a later time.
Yes, I'm going to be talking about that more as well on foods that can make you happy
Yeah,
and help with mental health.
right.
Absolutely.
Without the plunge, not
Exactly,
perfect.
exactly, exactly. Well, thank you so much for
Thank you,
having
Nikki,
me.
with 1K. I appreciate it. And
Everybody, please follow him because he is a wealth of knowledge, and he's always posting very interesting and insightful things on his TikTok. So
yeah.
please follow.
Yes, I appreciate it. And those of you that are on my page too for Holistic Chef Nikki, you have a great page, so I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And I
Yeah,
hope you have a
you
all
too.
right.
All right,
Good
good.
night. Bye bye.
And to my people that are still in the room, I will see you all. I usually come on. I'm usually on in the morning doing dream interpretation, so I will be on in the morning doing that. So for those of you that a lot of my regulars are here, so I will
On
see.
me.
All right. Good night.
Bye. Good night. I have to
Bye.
figure out this. Sorry.